Ice.
Woo!
Up the grass.
Walt Disney.
Oh, down there. Okay, you light that up?
Really, James?
This might be your beer.
Hang on. Should be working for them. Under a cypress tree on a cool fall day, I stood alone at the far end of the playground. The sap from the tree I was inspecting was sticky on my fingers. I drifted back to the time my mom took me shopping for cords at J.C. Penney's and I saw Carmen Felicetti. I was off in the toy section when I saw her walking down the aisle with her mother. When I went back to boys' activewear, I found my mom talking to her mom. Rather than say hi, in a panic I dove into a center section of a rack of slacks. I think they were twill. When the parental niceties were over and they parted, I reappeared, just in time to try on some rust-colored cords my mother had hanging neatly over her arm. Walking out to the car, I kept looking over my shoulder, praying Carmen hadn't seen me. Jimmy ran over from the swings and caught me staring at Carmen. "She's gross," he said. He would always say that girls were gross. And of course, he was right. All girls in general were gross, except for Carmen. She was different. She wore jeans and high tops and could climb a tree faster than almost anyone. Carmen didn't hang around with all the other little girls in their little dresses and bows. She was often by herself on the playground. Her long hair was dark and straight, she had big brown eyes, and she looked like Ally McGraw. I just had to find a way to be more like Steve McQueen. I knew I was stuck with this crush, and I knew I couldn't tell her that I liked her, and I couldn't throw things at her or hit her either, so I guess I'd have to hide it away like a dirty magazine. Without warning, I felt a sharp thud lay in the back of my head. As I fell forward, I heard cheers and snickers from the distance. I saw the brown leaves of fall racing across my all-stars. Somebody had thrown a rock at me. I turned back to see who it was, but there was nobody there. All the kids were back by the picnic tables, way back by the cafeteria, slurping milk boxes through bent sippy straws. I felt my head. It was warm and red. Or warm and wet, rather. And when I pulled my hand forward, it was red with blood. The white wool collar on my denim jacket was splattered with red droplets. I'd never seen so much of my own blood. I ran towards the school, stopping in front of all the other kids. I put my hand in my hair again. It was starting to cake. Jimmy caught up with me and asked if I was okay. "Yeah," I told him, feeling everyone's stares. Carmen was staring at me too, and I stared back blankly until she broke away and ran into the hall. I asked Jimmy if he'd seen him through the rock as Mrs. Collins came running over looking concerned. Jimmy started backing away and a nervous, twitchy look was on his face. The pitcher must have been near. Mrs. Collins grabbed me by the arm and led me towards the infirmary. As the nurse bandaged my head, she bent down and asked me why I wasn't upset or even bothered. I told her I didn't know as I looked off at a poster of a kitten hanging by his paws from a branch. After school, Jimmy told me that everyone thought I was tough because I didn't cry. I didn't say anything, but I knew it wasn't because I was tough. Because I couldn't cry. It seemed to me more like a defect. That night at dusk, Jimmy and I were on the hill near the city pool during the seniors' twilight swim. We had a metal pail filled with dead fish, soaked in lighter fluid from our after-school trip to the lake. I would light one on fire and toss it in the air, and Jimmy would wallop it towards the elderly bathers with an old wooden tennis racket. We took turns on the racket, but my heart just wasn't in it. All I wanted to see was Carmen. That's all I ever wanted lately. I'd seen her with other boys climbing trees and having rock fights, but I didn't know what to do. I was hopeless. I gave up the fish volley to check out a construction site, and under the bent sunlight of dusk, Jimmy and I were pulling up wooden stakes and sword fighting with them. As the sky slipped from blue to night, we were dancing through the skeletal frames of the project, clacking our sticks and posturing like we were in Sherwood Forest. From 2 houses away, Jimmy's mother called him home for dinner, her voice carried on the chill wind. He got in a sneaky jab when I wasn't looking and dropped a stick to run home. "See you tomorrow," he yelled, watching his high tops fade into the darkness. The streetlights came on and I was batting rocks into an open house. And I was about to leave when I saw little Philip Brandt throwing sticks into a deep open shaft. I went over on a sneak attack, lunging out from behind a high pile of wood. He jumped and looked at me, so scared I thought he was going to cry. And then we started to play and he came around, laughing and screaming, probably because I was an older kid whose gang he couldn't get into. I liked him and told him that this weekend he could come play football with us. His face lit up. His face lit up and a smile filled it. He asked me if I was going. Going where, I asked. He reached around and pulled a handmade card from his back pocket. To Carmen's party, he said, still smiling. I could feel my reaction start to cover me like a cloak. I reached out and snatched it from his hand. By now, Philip said something was wrong as I stared at the colorful invite. What's the matter, he asked, his face slipping to worry. I said nothing. With a blank gaze, I returned the card. As I put it back in his hand, I pushed him with all my strength. He fell backwards, screaming into the blackness of the hole, smashing his head on the way down. I looked in, gauging he must have been down about 15 feet or so, and he couldn't climb out. He continued to scream from pain and fear while I tipped a pallet over to cover the hole. Screams of pain changed to screams of terror. By now I was scared too and started to back away. Some headlights were coming down the road and I disappeared into the night. His muffled screams followed me on the wind as I ran home. Thanks.